Hello, hello, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Milton, the podcast with an audience of one, Milton Marquis, made by his daughter, Elizabeth Marquis. And today we are tackling one of the most important, hotly discussed topics in the entire globe, hotly discussed by, well, me and Milton. And that is, who is the true home run king? Is it Barry Bonds or Hank Aaron? So I decided to make this podcast because, one, I didn't want to spend really any money on a gift. I don't have any money. I should preface that. If I had money, Dad, I would spend money on you, but I simply don't have any. And let's ignore all the shoes in the background here. And two, because we've had this debate before, and I have said such statements as it's criminal that Barry Bonds, who is the greatest baseball player to ever live, isn't in Cooperstown. Cooperstown is corrupt. I don't care about steroid use. Everyone was on steroids. And I have had this exact conversation with you without really doing any research. And it's an important piece of context in case, I'm going to make the link to this public on YouTube. So maybe someone will fall down a rabbit hole and find this podcast episode and start listening to it. But I was not alive for most of the events that will be discussed in this video. So I really was just speaking on things that I did not witness and I did not do any sort of sustained research on. However, in preparation for this podcast, I have written out several pages of notes. If you are watching the video version of this podcast, you will see that I have lifted up a notebook and it was immediately whited out by the bright lights and it was not in focus. I have read many articles. I have deep dived into Baseball Reference, which is a very, very, very helpful website. I have watched video essays, which I will link in the description as part of the syllabus for this discussion. And the syllabus for this discussion also includes a book that I purchased, a book that Olivia purchased for you, called Why We Love Baseball, A History in 50 Moments, okay? And there are many little stories about Hank Aaron, many little stories about Barry Bonds in that book, and it's just a fun read. So let's get into this podcast. So what are we going to be discussing today? When I originally set out to make this podcast, it was kind of a joke where I was intending on just explaining for around 40 minutes why I think that Barry Bonds is the greatest baseball player of all time. And I was going to jokingly, read some of his stats and explain to you why I think he's the greatest baseball player of all time. The minute I started doing a little bit of research, I realized that I could not defend that thesis simply because he was an absolutely useless fielder. So that was immediately disproven because Hank Aaron, an argument could be made for Hank Aaron being a better hitter than Barry Bonds. And there is no argument whatsoever for Barry Bonds being defensively more useful than Hank Aaron. So we're going to cut the overall player foolishness now. And I'm going to acknowledge at the top of the podcast that my previous somewhat facetious statements about Barry Bonds being the greatest baseball player of all time are untrue. And Hank Aaron is an overall more well-rounded baseball player. Okay. When I was doing some research, and I don't want to start reading stats just yet because it's not Stat O'Clock yet. I'm going to find like a nice little theme song for Stat O'Clock. But Hank Aaron, he had a crazy, crazy, crazy long career, and he was an all-star every single season except for his first season in 1954 and his very last season in 1976. That's a level of consistency that no one is hitting today. No one is hitting today. We will get into this later on in the podcast when I start talking about Barry Bonds' like beast mode Barry era from 2001 to 2004. But Aaron didn't have a peak, which to some people might be a detraction. But for me, it speaks way more to his consistency that you can just be that good. He didn't have a season where he hit more than 47 home runs, but he was still the home run king. That was crazy to me. So that's the beauty of this podcast. And that's why this is technically a gift for you, but it's really kind of been a gift for me because I'm starting to really understand your perspective a little bit more. And I'm gaining a whole new appreciation for Henry Aaron and his career, like seriously. But let's get into some of the intangibles before I get into statistics, because I want to give both players a fair shot. And if I just start reading statistics, in my opinion, it makes Barry Bonds the clear winner from a hitting standpoint. So let's get into intangibles. And I will start with Henry Hank Aaron. Hammerin' Hank. Ahem. As previously mentioned, crazy consistent. Most homers ever in a season was 47. However, he had 8 40-plus home run seasons. And those 40-plus home run seasons, most of them were 40-30 seasons. And he was the first player to have a 40-30 season. And no one had a 40-30 season after him until Jose Canseco. That was crazy. And, well, okay, we're not getting into steroids yet. Let me put that on pause. I'm really just repeating things that I already thought about off the top of my head. But again, no peak, which for some people is a detraction. For me, that is a big plus. That means that you are it. You don't have to be flashy. So he's only won one MVP, which when we go head to head during Stat O'Clock, did I call it Stat O'Clock or did I call it? Yeah, I think I called it Stat O'Clock. When we go head to head during Stat O'Clock and we get into Barry Bonds and his MVPs, I do kind of use this as a detraction. However, he only has one MVP because his whole career is the MVP award. He was just so incredibly consistent, but there was no real standout season. All of his seasons were consistently excellent, which for me is a plus. Okay. Also, I have issues with the MVP award, and I'm not convinced that, back in the 50s and 60s, that MVP voting was fair. I'm not convinced. So, because he has plenty of batting titles. So, whatever. I don't think that that's necessarily a fair metric to use. Also, he was 25-time All-Star. I wrote that down, but that can't be correct. 1954, 1976. Oh, he was a 25-time All-Star. Again, we're getting into that consistency. Okay. And also, he was an elite fielder. That is something that Barry Bonds could never have. Barry could never. Okay. So yeah, those are the primer notes on Hank Aaron. Now we have some intangibles for Barry Bonds. And I do want to say that some of these are not necessarily baseball related. And I mean, this is my opinion. This is not, a historical essay. These are not facts. These are just things that I think this is my podcast that I just made up and only recording one episode. This is my podcast, Mike, that I paid my good hard earned $50 for. So I can say whatever I want. Okay. Barry Bonds intangibles. I love his little dangly earring that he wears. That's a plus. I think that the dangly earring was so fun. And you know what? He was really a trendsetter because in 2023, all the guys started wearing little dangly cross earrings. I thought that was really cute. And if I remember correctly, I think Ken Griffey Jr. also had a cute little earring. And I'd like to think that that was inspired by Barry Bonds. Okay. We will get into walks when we get into the stats. And this is a crucial piece of the syllabus. There is a video essay that I watched from Foolish Baseball, which is a channel that I think you would really, really like. And it is called, wait, no, it wasn't Foolish Baseball. It was Secret Base. But it will be linked in the syllabi. But it was called What If Barry Bonds Played Without a Bat? Dad, it was crazy. It was crazy. I think that they used 2000, basically they picked a random plate appearance in 2004. And they were like, the concept of it was that Barry Bonds was being intentionally walked so frequently that he had such a high chance of making it on base, even if he didn't have a bat and physically could not hit the ball. So like the premise of the video is that the pitcher thinks that he has a bat and thinks that he's going to swing. And like, oh, Dad, the video was just so good. That's honestly a way better Barry Bonds video than I could ever make. So you should just go watch that one. But just sheer breaking down the walks stat. Okay. Sheer intimidation factor. We will go into all of his intentional walks starting in 2000 when he started doing steroids. But we will go into all of his intentional walks. But also, this is pre-steroids. This is in Pittsburgh. This all started. Insane plate discipline. Insane discernment at the plate. Okay? And when you think of people who are like power hitters or like, you know, like true outcome hitters, you are not thinking about plate discipline. They're either going to hit a home run or strike out. But Barry Bonds is introducing a third outcome. That's crazy. That's crazy. You can't get him out. And that's why his OBS is so high. We will get to that in Stat O'Clock. Okay. Back to intangibles. Home runs are fun to watch. Yes, that is so true. The same obviously could be said for Hank Aaron. However, he was just kind of like hitting them, spread out like across a bunch of seasons, apparently across 25 excellent seasons and 2 decent ones. But Barry Bonds had really explosive seasons and like huge single season home run chases. Like that was exciting. And the home runs were huge. I found so many YouTube videos of like just monster home runs, especially when he was playing in San Francisco and all those balls, they weren't just going in the river. The guys in the river had to really, really, really kayak to go get them. That is entertainment value. And to me, that is one of the most important things that a ball player can bring to the table. I don't care how good you are. That's why I have this thing with Mike Trout. I don't care how good you are. He's boring. He's so boring. And he's never won anything. Again, we will get to that with detractions from Barry Bonds. But it's like he's so boring that I don't even care that he's good, right? But with Barry Bonds, he's exciting and he's good. That means something to me. That actually means a lot to me. Okay. What else? Oh, he beefed with Jeff Kent, who I hate. I hate Jeff Kent. Yes. Provided excellent drama with steroid scandal. I like scandals. I like political drama. I like legal drama. We know this, Dad. These are one of our shared interests again. So I kind of enjoy the intrigue and the mess of, a baseball superstar being forced to testify in front of Congress, and then obviously lying in front of Congress, and then getting got for perjury. Like, that's just like fun. Okay. I'm not necessarily saying that, I can't seriously say that that's a plus for Barry Bonds, because that is kind of bad, but it's so entertaining. And I like to be entertained. I really had so much more fun researching Barry Bonds than I did for Hank Aaron. Researching Hank Aaron was kind of sad. It was, because the time period was not fun. But Barry Bonds was playing baseball in the most fun time in the world. Oh my gosh. Dad, I wish I was born like 10 years earlier. I would have had the most amazing time. Seriously. Maybe if I had been born in not even 1990, even 1991, I really would have had a good time. Okay. What else? Oh, yes. So then again, another addendum to that is entertaining liar. Audacity. I like that, because I don't like, I don't necessarily need you to be a good person or a good role model. You got caught, but instead of like going and crying on TV and I want to apologize to my fans and all the kids that look up to me. No, he just doubled down and lied. I thought that was funny. I don't like that, but I thought it was funny. Also, I really like storylines. I like compelling storylines in sports. And so I like that he's a Nepo baby who surpassed his father. Yes, I like that, because that, to me, I feel like that shapes a lot of his mentality. And it kind of explains why he would do anything to get ahead, because he has all of these expectations on him. His dad, but his dad wasn't that good. I went and looked up his dad. His dad was kind of mid. Like it's like almost like a Ken Griffey Sr., Ken Griffey Jr. situation. His dad was kind of mid, but then of course his godfather is Willie Mays. So then you have like the weight of the world on your shoulders. You have to be good, and he was willing to do anything to be the best. That's what I like about Barry Bonds, and that's what I like about Timothée Chalamet and the way he's trying to win this Oscar right now, where it's not embarrassing to try. And he's willing to do anything and be cringy and lie and cheat and steal to be number one. I like that. I respect that. And then my last point is he was also crazy fast. So famously, one of my other favorite ever baseball players is Rickey Henderson. And Barry Bonds, he had a little Ricky in him before he started juicing. He was quick, and he had the first ever 30-50 season. Yes, so he's a quick little guy. So I really appreciated that. So I think that I have exhausted all of my intangibles for both of these players. And I think now I have no choice but to get into stat o'clock. Stat o'clock. It's a stat o'clock and stat o'clock, and the Barry Bonds hit a bunch of home runs, and Hank Aaron was MVP one time in the stat o'clock, and the stat bow. I didn't like any of the free songs that I found, so just a little stat, freestyle for Stat O'Clock. So for Stat O'Clock, I will be reading out, hopefully with minimal commentary, because I don't really want this podcast to be over an hour long, and I have work in the morning, and I keep every clip I make, I stop and I rewatch, and I just start laughing. So I really am running short on time. I have to be in bed by 10 o'clock tonight. And I have to do my skincare routine. But these stats are ranked in order of Lizportance, okay? So they are going to be presented in the order that is most important to me. And in my stat page, I have also made little notations because for some of these stats, it's not, I mean, this is going to be a head-to-head comparison, but the wonderful thing about picking two of the greatest of all time is that they are number one or number two of all time in a lot of these stats. So if someone is number one or if someone is number two, that will be noted as well. So, number one, most important stat of Liz Portance, you can probably guess, is home runs. And of course, you know that Barry Bonds is the head-to-head winner here. Barry Bonds has 762 home runs versus Hank Aaron's 755 home runs. So Barry Bonds is number one. Hank Aaron is number two. This is a stat that I don't think will be touched anytime soon. And here's why. I know I just said that I wasn't going to give commentary, but I'm giving commentary. Hank Aaron was only able to hit 755 home runs because he was able to have such a long and consistent career. So you would have to be putting up, 40 plus homer seasons for over 20 years to even touch 755, right? Or you could play for 15 good years and have 2 or 3 like standout seasons, like 62 home run seasons, like freak seasons, and maybe hit that number. But no one, I can't see, I should say, anyone being able to do that, because even in like the juice ball era, no one who has that kind of power seems to be able to stay healthy long enough to do that. So even Giancarlo Stanton, who I believe, I didn't really research anybody else other than these two, but I believe that Giancarlo Stanton is the active home run leader, like in terms of active players, he's number one. There's no way that he would ever touch the record because he can't stay healthy. Hello. There's no way that Aaron Judge will ever touch this record because, one, he can't stay healthy. He's too big. They're just too big. Okay. And also the only way that Barry Bonds, and this is big of me to admit, as a Bondsy, as a Bond girl, as a Barry Bonds defender, the only reason that Barry Bonds was able to hit 762 home runs was because he was on steroids. That's just the truth. The truth is also that I don't care about steroids, but now the league does. So you can't just do HGH anymore and hit all these home runs. So the circumstances under which these home runs were all hit, they cannot ever be replicated. Do I think that 762 is as untouchable as like a Ricky Henderson's stolen base record? No. But the pitchers are just getting too good also. I don't see anyone hitting 755. To be frank, I don't see anyone hitting 755. So, yes, obviously for home runs, Barry Bonds is number one, Hank Aaron is number two. And I refuse to, even with the caveat of Barry Bonds being on steroids, I refuse to then go into Stat O'Clock and say that, and put an asterisk next to it and say that Hank Aaron, really deserves to be number one, because he doesn't. This is Stat O'Clock. These are numbers. This is not Liz Pinions. These are just numbers. And also some of the pitchers were on steroids too. Okay. Some of the pitchers were on steroids that Barry Bonds hit these home runs off of. So I don't want to hear it. Number two, most important stat to me is, oh my gosh, bruh, you're literally calling me right now. Stop calling me, bro. Declined. Number two, most important stat for me is RBIs. And that is a win for Hank Aaron. So Hank Aaron has 2,297 home RBIs, and Barry Bonds has 1,996 RBIs. You already know what I'm going to say about Barry Bonds' RBI number. You already know what I am going to say. Do I think that Barry Bonds would have caught Hank Aaron? No. I think that Hank Aaron, hello, your father just called to check in. Love you, bye. Okay, well, I'm recording my podcast. Goodbye. Do I think that Barry Bonds would have caught Hank Aaron? No, I'm not that delusional. Do I think that there was a conspiracy against Barry Bonds and that he was railroaded and he was blocked from hitting 3,000, 2,000 RBIs? Yes, I do think that. And he also thinks that. I watched an interview that he did. Yeah, I really need to keep this paper in front of me because now I keep getting all my numbers mixed up. Okay. Also, I forgot that I'm adding in all-time rankings. Hank Aaron is number 1 in RBIs, okay? And Barry Bonds is number 5. That's pretty respectable. That's actually really respectable. Yeah. Wins above replacement. I don't know why I actually have this so high. But Barry Bonds wins this one with 162.8 career wins above replacement. So that puts him at number 4 all time. And then Hank Aaron is at 143.2 wins above replacement, which puts him at number 7 all time. And I think the reason why I put wins above replacement so high is partly to preemptively defend Barry Bonds for his lack of World Series wins. Because I think that this 162 number proves that he kind of did all that he could to bring up sucky teams. I mean, his value as a player is equivalent to 1 full season. So I just thought that was a cool stat. Hits. I actually probably should have put hits above wins above replacement. I don't really care. Okay. I'm tired of holding this microphone now. Hits. Hank Aaron wins hits. Obviously. Okay. So Hank Aaron has 3,771 career hits. That puts him at number 3 of all time. And in my head, before I researched this video, I actually thought that he was number 1 in hits all time, but that's not true. And then Barry Bonds, his hits, they're kind of lagging. He's at 2,935 hits. Again, that's what I was talking about was the conspiracy. The conspiracy was also to stop him from hitting 3,000 hits. And everyone knows this. And you know what? They did the same thing to A-Rod. Okay. Batting average. Hank Aaron wins this one again. 305 all-time batting average. 298 for Barry Bonds. So obviously this is not a stat where you can do all time. But, I mean, both of those are very respectable. Okay. On base percentage. Now, I will say that OBP was, I think, pretty tricky to track, like in the olden days when you were a kid. So I'm gonna be very generous here. Barry Bonds does win with a .444 OBP versus Hank Aaron's .374. But I think part of the reason why I have this relatively high, I mean, I'm including things in Stat O'Clock like MVP awards and rings. Okay. I have OBP so high though, because again, this goes back to some of my Barry intangibles, which are walks, plate discipline, but then also this is a great boost sort of for Hank Aaron because he's way better at just hitting for contact than Barry Bonds was. But I mean, a .444 is crazy high for an on base percentage. Like, so he's number 8 all time. But there are some active players in there. I feel like the rankings all time for percentages are kind of questionable. Okay. Slugging, I don't even care about that stat anymore. We're skipping it. Barry Bonds does win it, though. I don't want you to think I'm skipping it because Barry Bonds lost. Walks. Now, again, if I were truly crazy, I would have had walks way higher, because as much as I love home runs and I think that they're so exciting, I also think that walks are so important. And Barry Bonds is the most walked man in America. So Barry Bonds has 2,558 career walks. He's number 1. Okay. Hank Aaron has 1,402 walks. He's number 27, which is very respectable. That's very respectable because, I mean, he's walking less probably because he has more hits, okay, and more RBIs. But I think that when we get, I'm going to have a little segment also about Beast Mode Barry. The number of times he was intentionally walked was absolutely insane. And I feel like I'm yelling into the mic. I found a stat about the number of times he was intentionally walked with runners in scoring position. That is crazy. That, like, you only get walked intentionally with runners in scoring position when you're an it girl. When you're that girl, like, pitchers don't want to face you. They just don't. Okay? Then I really should have put this dead last, because not only does this implicate Barry Bonds, this also does implicate my actual favorite baseball player of all time, Aaron Judge. But ring ? No and yes. So we know who doesn't have one, and we know who does. I will say though, and this is a point that we both agree on, and we have both spoken about in the past. This is not basketball, where one, like LeBron or whoever, whatever the other one is too, Michael, whatever, can save your team and can carry you to a championship. This is just not that. And so it bothers me when people point to someone like Barry Bonds never winning a ring and act like that's a ding on him. That's not a ding on him. He was surrounded by scrubs most of the time, not all of the time. And he did make it to Game 7 of the World Series once. But that's really not on him. There's only so much you can do as an individual in a baseball game. And I just think that that's unfair. And I don't like when people say that about Aaron Judge either. How is it his fault that he doesn't have a ring? How is that his fault? Like, I don't understand that reasoning at all. There are some absolute scrubs with rings, so why does no one ever bring that into the conversation? So yeah, whatever. Like, Barry Bonds doesn't have a ring, and then also the other point is that Barry Bonds isn't in the Hall of Fame. I have already spoken on this, and I don't want to start getting irritated, because this is stat clock. This is just supposed to be numbers and yes or no questions. But the fact that Barry Bonds is not in the Hall of Fame is genuinely a national travesty. I still stand by that after all the research that I've done. I've changed my mind and changed my opinion about some things, but I stand strong in my conviction that Barry Bonds belongs in Cooperstown. The league wasn't even testing for steroids for a big chunk of the time when he was juicing up. Nobody cared. Nobody cared. And he is going to be penalized when there are people in the Hall of Fame who have done much worse. Maybe not from a baseball perspective, but there are people in the Hall of Fame. Well, okay, actually, Barry Bonds might not be a good person either necessarily. I actually don't know too much about his personal life, so I don't want to start like defending him on that level. But you can't do what Barry Bonds did for the sport of baseball, for the industry of baseball, and then be excluded from its Hall of Fame. It's disgusting. We will get into steroids later because I'm starting to get mad. Okay? And then the final metric is MVP awards. Barry Bonds has 7 MVP awards, and Barry Bonds won 4 consecutive MVP awards. No one's ever done that before. Yeah. So that was during his Beast Mode Barry era, and no one's ever done that before, and probably no one ever will. I mean, Aaron Judge should have 7 MVP awards. But yes, Hank Aaron has 1, and I think that that's respectable. And I think that, that's no ding on him. So that's the end. Oh my gosh, 17 minutes. Seriously, this was supposed to be a 5-minute segment. And now I'm mad at the end of recording this. That's the end of Stat O'Clock. Stat O'Clock. Okay, I've had a little sip of my Diet Coke, and I have regulated myself emotionally. I don't understand how I managed to get worked up during Stat O'Clock. It was literally just reading numbers, but I made it. I made it. But I want to go through Beast Mode Barry and address the elephant in the room, which is the steroid thing. Also, I don't know if you've noticed, but I've been wearing my Negro Leagues sweatshirt throughout the recording of this podcast as a little bit of an Easter egg, because Hank Aaron played like half of a season in the Negro Leagues before he made it to the major leagues. So that's fun. Okay. I'll start with the steroids. I feel like I have made it abundantly clear over the course of both my life and this podcast that I don't care about steroid use unless it's someone I hate, like Big Papi. When Big Papi uses steroids, then he is the devil reincarnate. But when anyone else does it, it's fine, and I actually kind of enjoy it. But with Barry Bonds in particular, I feel like it's really, really unfair to discount his achievements simply because he was on steroids. Point number 1. No, I'll save that for my last point because it's not very strong. Point number 1 is that I, from all of my research, don't believe that he was on steroids before the year 2000, right? And that's kind of a commonly held belief that he was not on steroids. And if he was, he wasn't using them consistently, or he hadn't found like a drug cocktail that worked for him before 2000. If you look at Barry Bonds' stats before 2000, I'm not even kidding. He's very reminiscent of Juan Soto. He's putting up Juan Soto numbers. He's putting up he has like a Ken Griffey type build, and he's focused on his plate discipline. He's stealing all these bases. He's actually a decent left fielder pre-steroids. He's already won 3 MVP awards before he starts using steroids. And he's already signed his massive free agent deal in 93 before he starts using steroids. So he's already elite. So he's only really using steroids from 2000 to, I don't even think it's fair to say he was using steroids for 7 years, because after he got caught, I'd like to think that he stopped. So he's probably only using steroids from 2000 to 2005 at the very latest. So how can his entire career be defined by 5 years? Were they his best 5 years? Yes, they were. They were his best 5 years. But I just don't think that that's fair to discount everything that he did pre-steroids. Also, this is point number 2, which is what I said wasn't a very strong point before, but now I've kind of convinced myself of it the more I've been thinking. Everyone was on steroids. This is not me saying that it was okay or whatever for him to be using steroids. That's not the point I'm making. The point I'm making is that everyone was on steroids. Jose Canseco, in an interview, again, unreliable narrator, but he said in an interview that he thinks around 85% of the league was using steroids at one point. Everybody was doing the drugs, but nobody was doing the hitting that Barry Bonds was doing. Okay? The more research that I did, the more I got an understanding of what steroids can do for the body and what steroids can do for a player. And steroids cannot turn you into an entirely new ball player. Sorry, had to burp. Steroids cannot turn you into an entirely new person. Barry Bonds already had the foundations, and he was already excellent, and he simply just had more power and more size due to the steroids and due to how big he got. But if everyone was on steroids, and if the only reason why Barry Bonds was so good was because he was on steroids, then why wasn't everybody else as good as Barry Bonds? Why was Barry Bonds superhuman, genuinely superhuman, between 2001 and 2004? If it's that easy, if all you had to do was steroids and everybody else was doing it, why wasn't everybody else Barry Bonds? And to me, that's the crux of the issue, is you still have to hit the ball. Do I think that the home runs would have been, the as long as the ones I was talking about earlier, the ones that went deep, deep, deep into the water? No. But they would have cleared the fence. So I just don't think that it's fair to put an asterisk on his entire career. And I don't think it's fair to refuse to honor him with a spot in Cooperstown just because he did drugs for a few years, okay? Like, I just have a big problem with it. And I think that when we did Stat O'Clock and you look at the head-to-head, you can see just on paper, yeah, Barry Bonds was a better power hitter than Hank Aaron was. Barry Bonds is the greatest hitter of all time. And that has been confirmed for me through my research. And I think that he could have done even more if he hadn't been, effectively forced into retirement in 2007. And that's not to say that he doesn't have a lot of blame for that. No one really forced him to lie to Congress. No one forced him to be, kind of an asshole. No one forced him to do those things. So he did kind of end up laying in the bed that he made, but I just can't see how you can reasonably say, with all the facts laid out in front of you, that anyone is a better hitter than Barry Bonds. And how can Barry Bonds' career have an asterisk next to it, but not the players who played pre-integration? How are those the clearest, fairest circumstances for us to judge the quality of their game? They aren't. So that's my thing with the steroids. Now, one just closing note, because I really, really, really don't want to make this too long. I want to make this podcast like the perfect length for you to listen to while you're on the bike or something at the gym. So maybe I can replace Rachel Maddow for one gym session. I knew that Barry Bonds was good. Everyone knows that. I didn't realize how good he was between 2001 and 2004 until I went and looked. And I was actually kind of scared. He was walked, and I had to write this down, in 2004. So he hits 45 home runs. That's light work. But he walks 232 times, and 120 of those times are intentional. And in 2004, he is 40 years old. That blew my mind. I watched a video essay talking about how the old man hitter is disappearing in baseball today. That is peak. That's not even old man hitter behavior. That is power hitter in their prime behavior. That speaks to the years of fear that Barry Bonds put into pitchers and managers around the league. That was the 120 intentional walks in his year 40 season. That was the statistic that sealed it for me. And so while this research for this project has given me a greater appreciation for both players, it has somehow turned me into even more of a Barry Bonds defender. And so hopefully you will be listening to this podcast early. Maybe I'll send it to you on Christmas Eve, and we'll have the opportunity to discuss and debate. But after all the research that I did, at the end of the day, it's still Barry Bonds. Merry Christmas, Dad.